Hello, everyone.
Welcome to Spoken English Podcast.
Sam, I want to admit something that's a little uncomfortable.
Okay, I'm ready. What is it?
For almost 2 years, I told myself I was bad at languages. Not just English, any language. I actually believed it was just part of who I am, like being tall or short.
Really? You? You speak so naturally now.
Well, back then, every time I made a mistake, I'd think, see, this proves it. I'm just not a language person. And that belief made me quieter, more nervous, less willing to even try.
So the belief itself was holding you back more than your actual English level.
Exactly. And the strange part is my English skills didn't dramatically overnight. What changed first was my mindset. Once I stopped believing I was bad at languages, I started making progress that had actually been possible the whole time.
That's such a powerful realization.
It really is, and that's exactly what we're talking about today.
How your mindset affects your English learning, maybe even more than grammar books or vocabulary lists.
Exactly, because if your mind is working against you, no method will feel like enough.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Spoken English Podcast, your friendly place to learn real, everyday English through natural conversation.
I'm Mira.
And I'm Sam. And today we're exploring something a little different, not new vocabulary or grammar rules, but the mindset behind learning English.
Because so many learners focus only on methods, apps, courses, textbooks, but ignore the mental side of learning, which is honestly just as important.
This episode is great for A2 to B1 learners, and honestly useful for any level because mindset issues don't disappear just because your grammar improves.
Later, we'll slow down for our word tour, useful words and phrases related to mindset and motivation.
And near the end, in Say It Better, we'll take some common learner sentences and upgrade them to sound more confident and natural.
So get comfortable, and let's talk about changing your mindset to learn English faster.
Mira, let's start with something really common. A lot of learners believe they're simply not good at languages. Where do you think that belief usually comes from?
I think it often comes from early experiences, maybe a difficult teacher, a bad grade, or comparing yourself to someone who seemed to learn faster. Those small moments can create a belief that sticks for years.
So the belief itself was less about actual ability and more about a story we told ourselves once and never questioned again.
Exactly, and that's such an important distinction. Ability can grow, but if you don't believe it can grow, you won't even try the things that would help it grow.
That sounds connected to something people call a growth mindset.
It absolutely is. A growth mindset means believing your skills and abilities can improve with effort and practice, rather than believing they're fixed and unchangeable.
Versus a fixed mindset where you believe you either have talent or you don't.
Exactly. And here's the tricky part. A fixed mindset feels true because when you avoid challenges, you also avoid failure, which feels safe in the short term.
But that safety comes at a cost.
A huge cost, because avoiding challenges also means avoiding the exact experiences that would help you improve.
You could say, I used to have a fixed mindset about learning languages, or I'm working on building a growth mindset instead.
Perfect examples.
Let's talk about mistakes, because I feel like that's where mindset really shows itself. How someone reacts to their own mistakes says a lot.
Absolutely. Someone with a fixed mindset might think, I made a mistake. That proves I'm not good at this. But someone with a growth mindset thinks, I made a mistake. That's useful information for improving.
Same event, completely different internal reaction.
Exactly. And that internal reaction shapes whether you keep trying or quietly give up.
What's a simple way learners can start shifting how they react to mistakes?
One helpful trick is changing your internal language. Instead of thinking, I'm so bad at this, try thinking, I'm still learning this. It's a small change in wording, but it completely changes how the mistake feels.
I'm still learning this. That already feels less painful.
It really does, because it turns a fixed judgment into an ongoing process.
You could say, I try to remind myself that I'm still learning, or reframing my mistakes helped me feel less discouraged.
I love that word, reframing.
Let's talk about comparison, because I feel like that destroys a lot of people's motivation. Comparing yourself to someone who speaks more fluently, for example.
Oh, comparison is such a silent motivation killer. You see someone speaking confidently, and instead of feeling inspired, you feel behind, even ashamed.
Why do you think comparison affects us so strongly, especially with language learning?
I think it's because speaking feels so personal. When your English isn't perfect, it can feel like people are judging you as a person, not just your grammar.
That makes so much sense. It's not just a skill, it feels connected to identity.
Exactly. And that's why comparison hurts more here than with other skills, like learning to cook, for example.
So what's a healthier way to relate to other people's progress?
A helpful shift is comparing yourself to your past self instead of comparing yourself to someone else's current level. You could say, I'm better than I was 6 months ago instead of I'm not as good as them.
That completely changes the emotional experience of progress.
It really does, because your past self is the only fair comparison. Everyone else started from a different place with different circumstances.
You could say, I'm trying to compare myself to my past progress, not to others, or focusing on my own growth helped me feel less discouraged.
Beautifully said.
Let's pause here for a moment. If you're enjoying this episode so far, please take a second to like this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Spoken English Podcast.
And we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us, do you ever compare your English to someone else's? We really do read your comments, so don't be shy.
All right, let's continue. Mira, what about perfectionism? I feel like that's another mindset trap a lot of learners fall into.
Oh, perfectionism is such a sneaky one because it disguises itself as high standards, when really it often just becomes fear wearing a nice outfit.
Fear wearing a nice outfit. I love that.
It's true, though. Perfectionists often wait until they feel ready to speak, but that moment of feeling perfectly ready almost never arrives.
So they stay silent, waiting for a level of confidence that requires practice they're avoiding.
Exactly. It's a frustrating cycle. You need practice to build confidence, but perfectionism stops you from practicing until you feel confident.
That's such an important pattern to recognize.
It really is. You could say, I used to wait until I felt ready before speaking, or I'm learning to speak imperfectly instead of staying silent.
Speak imperfectly. That phrase feels almost freeing.
It genuinely is. Progress usually comes from imperfect action, not perfect preparation.
Let's talk about motivation itself. A lot of learners start with a lot of excitement, but that motivation fades after a few weeks. Why do you think that happens?
I think it's because people rely on motivation as an emotion, something that has to feel strong and exciting all the time. But motivation naturally rises and falls. It's not meant to stay high constantly.
So relying only on emotional motivation sets people up for disappointment.
Exactly. That's why habits matter more than motivation in the long run. Habits keep you moving even on days when motivation is low.
Can you give an example of that difference?
Sure. Motivation says, I feel excited to study today. A habit says, I study for 10 minutes every day, whether I feel excited or not. The habit doesn't depend on emotion.
That completely shifts the responsibility from feelings to structure.
Exactly. You could say, I'm trying to build a habit, not just rely on motivation, or my motivation comes and goes, but my habit stays consistent.
I really like that distinction, motivation as a feeling, habit as a structure.
It's honestly one of the biggest mindset shifts for long-term learners.
What about self-talk? I feel like the way people speak to themselves internally really affects how they approach learning.
Oh, self-talk is huge. If your internal voice constantly says, you're too slow, or you'll never sound natural, that voice becomes a barrier, sometimes bigger than any grammar rule.
So changing that internal dialogue could actually change learning outcomes.
Absolutely. You could say, I'm working on being kinder to myself while learning, or I try to replace negative self-talk with encouragement.
That connects back to something we talked about in a previous episode, self-compassion.
Exactly. It all connects. Mindset, self-talk, self-compassion, they're all pieces of the same puzzle.
Let's talk about fear of judgment, because I feel like that's a massive mindset block for a lot of learners, especially when speaking out loud.
Oh, fear of judgment is enormous. People worry, what if I sound stupid? What if they laugh at my accent? And that fear can completely silence someone even if their English is actually quite good.
What's a helpful mindset shift for that specific fear?
One helpful shift is remembering that most people are focused on their own communication, not silently judging your accent. Also, having an accent isn't a mistake, it's simply part of your unique voice.
That's such an important reminder. An accent isn't something to fix, it's part of who you are.
Exactly. You could say, I'm learning to accept my accent as part of my voice, or I remind myself that most people aren't judging me as harshly as I judge myself.
That last one really hits home.
It does for me too, honestly.
Let's talk about setbacks. Like when someone studies really hard for a while, then life gets busy and they fall out of practice completely.
This happens to almost everyone at some point, myself included, and here's where mindset really matters. Some people see a setback as proof they've failed completely and give up entirely.
While others see it differently?
Exactly. Others see it as a pause, not a permanent stop. You could say, I took a break, but I'm starting again. Or, I fell out of practice for a while, but I'm getting back into it.
That completely removes the shame from starting again.
It really does, because starting again isn't failure, it's simply continuing your journey, even if the path wasn't a straight line.
I love how much of this conversation keeps coming back to that idea. Progress isn't a straight line.
Because it truly isn't, for any skill, not just English.
Let's talk about curiosity for a moment. I feel like curiosity plays a bigger role in mindset than people realize.
Oh, curiosity is incredibly underrated. When you approach English with curiosity instead of pressure, learning feels lighter, almost like exploring rather than performing.
Can you give an example of what that looks like in daily life?
Sure. Instead of thinking, I need to memorize this grammar rule perfectly, you could think, I wonder why English uses this structure. That's kind of interesting. That small shift makes the brain more open instead of defensive.
So curiosity removes some of that pressure we talked about earlier.
Exactly, because pressure narrows your focus, while curiosity widens it. When you're curious, mistakes feel like discoveries, not failures.
You could say, I'm trying to stay curious instead of anxious while learning. Or curiosity makes studying feel less like a test.
That's such a gentle way to reframe the whole learning process.
Let's talk about identity for a moment, because I think this might be one of the deepest parts of mindset. Do you think how someone sees themselves affects their English learning?
I think it might be one of the most powerful factors, honestly. If someone thinks, I'm just not an English speaker, that identity quietly shapes their effort, their confidence, even their willingness to try.
So the identity comes first and the behavior follows it.
Exactly. But the reverse is also true. If someone starts thinking, I'm becoming an English speaker, even before they feel fully confident, that small identity shift changes how they show up.
That's such a subtle but powerful difference. I'm not an English speaker versus I'm becoming an English speaker.
You could say, I'm starting to see myself as someone who speaks English, or I try to think of myself as a learner in progress, not a failure.
That feels like such a hopeful way to end this part of the conversation.
It really is, because identity isn't fixed. It's something you can gently shape one small belief at a time.
Let's bring everything together, Mira. If someone remembers just one thing from today's episode, what should it be?
I think it's this. Your mindset isn't just background noise while you learn English. It's actually part of the method. Believing you can grow, being kind to your mistakes, comparing yourself only to your past self. These things matter just as much as vocabulary or grammar.
So mindset and method work together, not separately.
Exactly. And once you start shifting your mindset, the same methods you've been using suddenly start working better because you're finally out of your own way.
All right, let's slow down now and go through today's word tour, useful words and phrases related to mindset and motivation.
Let's begin with our first word tour, growth mindset.
Growth mindset. Growth mindset.
This means believing your abilities can improve with effort and practice, rather than staying fixed forever.
You could say, I'm working on building a growth mindset, or a growth mindset helped me stop fearing mistakes.
Nice examples. Let's move to our second word, reframe.
Reframe. Reframe.
To reframe means to look at a situation differently, often in a more helpful or positive way.
You could say, I try to reframe my mistakes as learning opportunities, or reframing my thoughts helped me feel less discouraged.
Our third phrase is speak imperfectly.
Speak imperfectly. Speak imperfectly.
This means being willing to speak even without perfect grammar or pronunciation, instead of staying silent.
For example, I'm learning to speak imperfectly instead of staying quiet, or choosing to speak imperfectly helped me improve faster.
Phrase number 4, fall out of practice.
Fall out of practice. Fall out of practice.
This describes losing consistency in a skill, usually because life gets busy or motivation drops.
You could say, I fell out of practice for a few months, or it's easy to fall out of practice when life gets stressful.
Our fifth phrase is stay curious.
Stay curious. Stay curious.
This means keeping an open, interested attitude instead of feeling pressured or anxious.
For example, I try to stay curious instead of anxious while learning, or staying curious makes mistakes feel less scary.
And our final phrase today is becoming.
Becoming. Becoming.
This word describes an ongoing identity shift, seeing yourself as someone growing into a skill rather than already failing at it.
You could say, I'm becoming more confident in English, or I like to think of myself as becoming a speaker, not failing as one.
So today's phrases were growth mindset, reframe, speak imperfectly, fall out of practice, stay curious, and becoming.
Try picking just one or two of these and using them the next time you think about your own learning journey.
Now let's move to one of my favorite parts, say it better. We'll take a few simple sentences and make them sound smoother and more natural.
Let's start with this one. A learner might say, I am bad in English, I never improve.
That's honest, but quite harsh on yourself. A smoother, more accurate way to say it is, English is still difficult for me, but I'm slowly improving.
Much more encouraging. Here's another one. I stopped study for long time, I am failure.
We can smooth that into, I fell out of practice for a while, but I'm starting again.
That completely removes the shame from it. Next sentence. I scared to speak because make mistake.
A more confident version would be, I'm learning to speak imperfectly instead of staying silent.
I love that shift from fear to action. One more. I compare myself all the time with others.
You could smooth that out into, I'm trying to compare myself to my past progress, not to others.
These small changes really do make a big difference in how hopeful and confident your English sounds.
Absolutely. It's not about complicated vocabulary. It's about choosing language that reflects growth, not judgment.
So today we talked about how mindset shapes English learning, growth versus fixed thinking, reacting to mistakes, comparison, perfectionism, motivation versus habits, self-talk, fear of judgment, setbacks, curiosity, and even identity.
And I hope this episode reminded you that your mindset isn't separate from your English learning. It's actually one of the most powerful tools you already have.
Maybe I'll finally stop calling myself just okay at things.
Progress over labels, right?
Exactly that. If this episode helped you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Spoken English Podcast so you never miss a new lesson.
And we'd genuinely love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, what's one belief about yourself you'd like to change while learning English?
Also, if you know someone who's feeling discouraged in their English journey, please share this episode with them. It might be exactly the shift they need.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Take care of your English and take care of your mindset, too.
This is Sam.
And this is Mira.
And you've been listening to Spoken English Podcast. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.